Hey, this is manic.mercurian. Welcome to your forecast for the week of February 3rd through 9th, 2025. So, we're just coming off of some really big changes that occurred last week. Just to refresh your memory, last week we had Mercury enter Aquarius at the beginning of last week. We had the new moon in Aquarius on Wednesday, the 29th, and then Uranus stationed direct on Thursday, the 30th. Also, Saturday the 1st, which might be around the time of your listening to this. I don't know when you're listening to this, whatever. But Saturday the 1st, we also had Venus, North Node, and Neptune all conjunct around 27, 28 Pisces. So basically, I really do feel that the week of January 27th through February 2nd, I really do feel like we entered a new phase during that week, okay? Basically, what we're starting to enter is the buildup, the escalation, which this buildup is going to start out gradual at first, but it's going to ramp up exponentially. Okay, so what we're seeing is we're gradually getting into this buildup. We're setting the stage, so to speak, for much larger things that, as many of you know, there's going to be really intense changes that will really be very much more in your face by the time we get to March, April, May, June, July, etc. This year is just going to get crazier and crazier. But right now, during this whole Aquarius season, this is the setup. This is the buildup. We're putting things into place. Whether you're aware of it or not, your life is being set up in a certain way. Like looking back 6 months from now, you'll look back and go, okay, wow, like my whole life has changed. But really, it all started back in February or maybe even January. But really, it all started back in Aquarius season, basically. Okay, so yeah, really important stuff, but it may not always be super clear at this point. But let's talk about this week, though. That's what we're talking about here. So let me just kind of list off some major things going on this week, and then we'll do the day-by-day forecast. So basically, we have Venus changing signs. Let me adjust my volume. I'm sorry, my volume's been really messed up lately. Venus is changing signs on the same day Jupiter stationing direct, which I am personally extremely excited about. We also have a quarter moon that's going to shake things up in the middle of the week. We have Neptune making that exact conjunction to the North Node, which is that's really going to be affecting us the entire week. So I'll give you my spiel on that. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up the week with this kind of weird Mercury and Sun conjunct and both sextiling Chiron at the same time. So that, honestly, that looks scary to me, but I'm going to get into all of that. Okay, so, one last thing too. I always like to say what the moon is doing for the week before we start the day by day. Basically, the moon's going to be transiting from Aries through Cancer this week, so not bad territory for the moon to go through. Moon, like I said, moon will reach that 90-degree aspect where it squares the sun, but other than that, it's going to be making a pretty harmonious trine. And starting out the week, it'll be in Aries, which is a little bit more volatile, especially for the moon. But after that, going through Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, this is a really sweet spot for the moon to transit through. So that, at least the moon is very content on that kind of front. Okay, so starting out with Monday, February 3rd, we start out with, of course, like Sun is about halfway through Aquarius, and then Moon is, let's just say, like 2/3 of the way through Aries, roughly. I guess technically it's more than that, whatever. But Moon is still making a really loose kind of sextile to the Sun. Sun in Aquarius, Moon in Aries. We do have two aspects today, so those would be Mars squaring Chiron. So don't even get me started on that. These actually make kind of a loose T-square with the Sun as well. So how do we unpack this? So I really feel like there's been this kind of like unspoken weirdness and tension when it comes to Mars. Mars has been retrograde for quite some time now. Really, I don't have the exact date in front of me. I apologize. But Mars has been retrograde. It was well into Leo when it stationed retrograde, I believe in December. And so, we've been going through this whole Mars retrograde for a long time. Mars being retrograde and debilitated in Cancer, it shows that our ambitions, we're not all exactly aware of our ambitions, or we're not able to like realize them, to make them happen and to go forward. There's something muddled, there's something unclear when it comes to our ambitions and our drive. So now that energy is is reaching this conflict with Chiron and Aries. Chiron and Aries more has to do with our personal wounds and our traumas, our tragedies, so to speak. This is even more intense because Moon is basically conjunct Chiron as this aspect happens. So basically, to simplify this, I would say Monday looks intense. Monday, I just realized I was wrong when I said this makes a T-square with the Sun in Aquarius. I apologize. That's 2 strikes for me. I'm sorry. I usually never mess up in these forecasts. No, that was incorrect. But Moon and Chiron are squaring Mars basically. So this looks like a volatile day to me. Typically with the Moon sextiling the Sun, this would be very harmonious, and that element, that aspect is still there to some extent. But with Mars squaring Chiron, especially for those of you that have any cardinal placements, especially cardinal placements around 19 degrees, so 19 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, those placements are going to be triggered by this. Those are going to show areas of your life where you need to make a sudden change. There's going to be conflict. There's a need for adaptation or for instigation. You need to start something. You need to get the ball rolling with something. But for any of us as well, this shows conflict. This shows tension. This shows, I think Mars retrograde in Cancer is kind of bringing up stuff from the past. And I think Chiron and Aries is more than willing to do that as well. Like both of these are suggesting, digging stuff off, kind of like picking that scab, so to speak. It's kind of a nasty analogy, but I think it's very effective. Like this is ripping off the wound. It's like digging up this old stuff. And I think that's very, in a way, it looks destructive to me, chaotic. We're combining fire and water here. We're combining Mars and Chiron. These are really passionate, intense energies, very sensitive. It's bringing stuff up to deal with, basically. This may not be like the cleanest process. This may be messy. This may be tumultuous. But this may be great at digging stuff up in order for us to process it, whether it's on an individual level or whether it's bringing stuff up in order to process it with someone else. But again, this is really going to be a lot more intense if you have those placements around 19 degrees of the cardinal signs. It's not going to be as relevant if you don't have those placements. One other aspect for today is Mercury trining Jupiter. I think this is especially interesting because Jupiter is basically stationing direct. It's basically at a standstill. It's not technically direct yet, but it's pretty much there. It's almost there, if that makes sense. So right before Jupiter technically stations direct, Mercury kind of gives this nod or this like wink to Jupiter, so to speak. So basically Mercury at 11 Aquarius. Mercury's cruising, by the way. Mercury's going more than 1 degree per day right now. Mercury's traveling very fast. But Mercury at 11 Aquarius trines Jupiter at 11 Gemini. So this suggests to me really great intellectual energy, really great energy for learning, for conversations, or, for kind of just having like a detached, kind of playful attitude and maybe being very experimental. Like, let's try something new. Let's think about something new. This is a very airy, very intellectual energy, and very harmonious too. So the fact that we have these two very different aspects happening on the same day, it's strange. I really think today is going to be felt differently depending on your own astrology. Do you have a lot of air placements? Okay, well, you're going to feel this Mercury trine to Jupiter much more. You'll feel a lot of intellectual energy, a lot of energy, about learning and stimulation. But again, if you have more cardinal placements, then this is going to be more emotional, more passionate, more intense. In a way, kind of the exact opposite. This brings up kind of the question of what about Libra? Libra is an air sign and it's a cardinal sign. I think Monday. I'm so scatterbrained right now. I've been in a weird mood today. I'll be really honest. But Monday, February 3rd, the day that we're talking about, I think it will be the weirdest for Libra, because if you have those Libra placements, especially between, let's say, 10 and 19 degrees of Libra, those placements are going to be involved in both of these aspects for Monday. So Monday's a weird day, probably for everyone in different ways, but especially for Libra. If you're Libra, you're simultaneously experiencing this harmonious intellectual energy, but also the tumultuous, intense, passionate energy at the same time. And that's a lot for you to deal with. But luckily, Libra is the master of like absorbing completely different, completely contrasting energies at the same time. I think Libra can handle this. I would love to spend more time on that, but this forecast is already going to be too long. I can feel it. Let's go to Tuesday, February 4th. Okay, so this is a really big day, all right? I should mention Moon leaves Aries and enters Taurus right around midnight, Monday night. So for most of us, especially in America or Europe, where I know most of my viewers are from, most of us will experience Moon and Taurus basically all day. But the two major events, Moon is exalted in Taurus. That's really harmonious. That's great. Okay, but we're building up to the first quarter moon. Okay, but the two major events are Venus entering Aries and Jupiter stationing direct. I'm honestly so excited about this, and that is I'm being a little subjective right now. I'm being a little biased because Jupiter just happens to be conjunct my rising. But really, this is something that I think we can all be excited about. I've been paying attention to Jupiter retrogrades over the last several years, really at least the last several years, if not more so. And, Jupiter retrograde takes, I believe, 4 or 5 months. But really, there's this kind of yearly cycle to Jupiter where you may experience, 7, 8 months of expansion, and then there's 4 or 5 months of retraction, and then 7 or 8 months of expansion again. You can really see this in people who have a lot of Sagittarius placements or maybe Cancer or Pisces. They'll go through these cycles if Jupiter is really strong in their charts. But again, to a lesser extent, we all experience this. So basically, that's what we're coming out of now. We just had 4 to 5 months of retraction, which I think was especially harsh this time around because Jupiter was not only retrograde, Jupiter is also in detriment in Gemini. So now Jupiter is finally stationing direct, and finally, basically, when a planet stations direct, it basically comes back online. It's becoming its normal self again. It's acting more overtly, more outwardly. And I think this is especially a blessing when it comes to Jupiter, because normal Jupiter is very outward. It's very direct. It's very much about expansion. So Jupiter retrograde, I think, is especially distressing, more so than other planets. Like, I don't know, what would an example be? Like even Mercury, for example. Mercury has to do with thoughts and intellect. Thoughts and intellect can work both ways. You can, apply those outwardly, or you can take them in, right? But Jupiter, with all that expansion, to me, it kind of breaks my heart to see Jupiter retrograde. So my point is, Jupiter direct, we're bringing that expansion energy back online, back in the picture. We're moving forward, especially when it comes to, learning and intellect, all those Gemini things. But this is more of a long-term transit. This isn't something specifically about Tuesday. This is just something that will continue to be true for many months to come. I believe, actually, now that we're talking about that, I believe Jupiter will actually be direct. It'll actually reach Cancer before it retrogrades again later this year. Okay, and the other event, Venus entering Aries, that's not as positive on an objective level because, technically Venus is in detriment in Aries. Those of you that have major Aries placements, though, this is a blessing for you because with a benefic like Venus in your sign, you become extra charismatic. You can find pleasure and abundance more readily. So kudos to you, Aries people. But for us kind of on a more collective level, it's kind of rough having Venus in detriment in Aries. And, speaking of Jupiter again, we've already had Jupiter in detriment in Gemini for quite some time now, since last year. Now Venus, the other great benefic, is also in detriment. And, the third benefic is the Sun. Sun is also in detriment as well. So that's pretty wild. The 3 planets that are the most vital, that have the most to do with abundance and fun and pleasure, Jupiter, Venus, Sun, they're all in detriment this week. So that just shows that it's not necessarily that there is no pleasure to be had, that there's no fun, there's no abundance, there's no joy. Like we talked about with Jupiter, at least Jupiter's direct now. We can have a little bit more abundance that way. But even with all three in detriment, basically what that means is you have to look outside of the box for your pleasure, for your joy, for your pride, for your abundance. You can find these things, but you have to be resourceful. You have to be curious. You have to be open. You have to be willing to look at some areas that you may not normally look at. That's what detriment energies are really great at doing. They're great at, getting us outside of our comfort zone, looking at things in a different way. Look at everything upside down. Maybe it'll actually make more sense that way. Maybe you can actually find a pleasure that's even better than what you're used to, but it's just different. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, on a more mundane level, Venus and Aries, the reason why it's in detriment is because Venus tends to do well in signs that are very stable and harmonious, like Taurus, Libra. Even Pisces is very receptive and kind of inward focused. Aries is very outgoing, very outward focused. And so when Venus is in Aries, we tend to be bored easily. We tend to be restless. So it's hard to find long-term pleasure and satisfaction because we're always looking at, the next quick fix, the next thing, whatever it is. We're looking for something else. It's hard to be satisfied. But again, satisfaction can be found. It's just that we may need some more action with Venus and Aries. We may need more activity. Yeah, pretty much just that. Let's go ahead. I'm so sorry. This forecast is going to be a mess, but I'm doing my best. Just be aware, I'm going through my own cycles. It's very difficult for me to do these forecasts every week in a consistent, to have the quality be consistent week to week is difficult because, my mental processes are not consistently quality, if that makes sense. I literally am Mercury. Anyway, Wednesday, February 5th. Okay, this is another big day because we have a first quarter moon at 16 degrees Taurus. So, typically moon in Taurus would be, it's exalted. It's very grounded. It's typically, it gives us our best shot at being emotionally grounded on a collective level. However, there are actually two major exceptions to this. One is the first quarter moon, the 90-degree aspect that the moon is making to the sun on this day. That really indicates that we are moving forward. I always talk about how the first quarter moon is, in my opinion, the most overlooked part of the lunar cycle. The first quarter moon is at least as volatile as the full moon. This is a big deal. This is going to shake you up and tell you, hey, you need to get out there, do something new, try something else out. You need to make some kind of change to your life. Where does 17 degrees Taurus fall in your chart? Because I guarantee you that shows you an area of your life that you need to make some kind of change. I got sidetracked, but that's one reason why this is volatile. The other reason why is because this particular first quarter moon at 17 Taurus is loosely conjunct Uranus. Okay, so this has been a big deal ever since Uranus entered Taurus in 2018. Taurus is typically such a chill sign, but because Uranus is there, anytime a planet like the moon, for example, is near Uranus, it adds this kind of tumultuousness. It adds this level of unpredictability. So basically, this quarter moon on Wednesday, this indicates we are all, maybe some of us more than others, but we're all open to epiphanies and sudden breakthroughs, sudden changes in our perception today. I think this will be especially true as well because of the detriment planets. Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Venus, and the Sun are all in detriment or fall. And honestly, we've had this weird combination. I think just because of Uranus and Jupiter, some of these outer planets being in detriment or fall, and then Mars, some of these slower moving planets, really, I feel like it's been most of this winter and even last fall where we've had we've had a lot of planets debilitated for quite some time, is what I'm trying to say. So this is not something new, but it is something very relevant. And I forgot where I was going with that. Basically, just it's it's a weird time. It's a weird time, but it's excellent for having us look at things a new way and being open to these epiphanies. I personally love Uranian energy because it's great for learning something new. If you're here listening to this, you're open to weird information. You're open to astrology and weird cycles and patterns, things that you didn't think would be true that turned out to actually be true. So I know that you must feel me on some kind of level. Like Uranus is great for that, for showing you like, oh, you thought reality was this way, but it's actually this way. So this quarter moon on Wednesday will shake you up and will change. I guarantee you, if you look for it, there's going to be some kind of epiphany there, some kind of perception change for you. That could be distressing, but it's also what will free you. It's also empowering. Thursday, there's no aspects for today. I've got aspects for you every other day this week, just not this week. But the moon does change signs today. Moon, pretty early in the day, Eastern time, moon leaves Taurus and enters Gemini. And I personally believe that moon does pretty well in Gemini. Moon in Gemini is a really fun sign. This is especially true because Sun and Mercury are in Aquarius. So they're going to be making those trines, or technically moon will be making those trines. And moon is approaching a conjunction to, freshly direct Jupiter as well. So I really think things are going to lighten up pretty dramatically on Thursday. It's just going to be just light. Like, let's just play around. Like, why take everything so seriously? Let's have a good time. Let's learn something new. Let's have a great conversation. Let's make some jokes maybe. It's completely different than Tuesday and Wednesday, where things were very intense and a lot was changing. Thursday, hopefully, ideally, we've embraced those changes and now we're finding some kind of harmony. This is a quirky energy, okay? I should mention, because suddenly we have a lot of air energy again. I know we had a lot of air planets last week as well. I guess that's been somewhat consistent, but with moon now in an air sign again, suddenly it's just very quirky. Gemini and Aquarius, I think, is where most of the focus is. Also Pisces still. But Gemini and Aquarius are both very experimental, very curious, very open. Let's just shake things up. Let's try something new. They're very anti-status quo. Personally, I have major Gemini placements. I am much more biased in favor of whatever is new versus whatever we've already been doing. You know what I mean? So anyway, so that's the energy on Thursday. Let's do something new. Let's shake it up. Let's change things. So if you have a lot of air placements, you will embrace Thursday. Thursday will be easy for you. If you don't have a lot of air placements, I challenge you to, can you maybe learn to be a little bit more like an air sign in order to embrace today? Use whatever's in your natal chart to kind of bridge that gap. Air signs are intellectual. They're detached. They're open to ideas. They're interested in people. There must be, even if you have no air placements, there must be something in your astrology that relates to that. And by tapping into that, you can embrace this energy for today. I feel like I give really good advice, but it's messed up. I never actually apply most of what I talk about in these forecasts, but I really should. I honestly believe this stuff. I feel like I would benefit from taking my own advice, but I don't take my own advice. I think I'm kind of like Chiron in that way. Let's talk about Friday, February 7th. Moon continues cruising on through Gemini. Moon will actually make some trines first to Mercury and then to the Sun. You can see Eastern Standard or Eastern Time, whatever. Eastern Time, Moon makes that exact trine to the Sun at 19 Aquarius from 19 Gemini. So yeah, very harmonious. We started out the week pretty rough, pretty tumultuous, lots of action, lots of change. Things are still changing now. I do think with all this air energy later in the week, air signs are oriented toward change. However, this is a more harmonious change. This is more smooth, generally speaking. Friday starts a bit of a weird dynamic. So how do I approach this? One thing is Venus sextiles Pluto, which is, I think this is kind of sexy. And if I'm being completely honest, Pluto is a very obsessive, very passionate, very intense planet. And then Venus is the planet of love and romance, attraction. And they're making this sextile, which is a very harmonious, aspect. Another thing too, and I know some people may fight me on this, but I personally believe that Pluto is in fall in Aquarius and exalted in Leo. I've done videos talking about this. If you're interested, I can link them. Just let me know. But my point is Venus and Pluto are agreeing. They're making this like fun little phone call or this fun conversation. It's not a super intense conversation. It's, sextiles are not the most intense aspect. They're the weakest of the major Ptolemaic aspects. But they're still a major aspect. And because Venus and Pluto are both in detriment / fall, I don't know, it's almost like two friends that neither of them are doing well, but they make a phone call, and it's kind of like misery loves company, right? So on this day, I think there's some kind of connection to, can we find pleasure in a very maybe weird and unsettling way, a way that's unexpected, some kind of pleasure that's maybe slightly obsessive and strange and weird. Like it makes me think of Halloween energy. That kind of just popped into my head. It's dysfunctional, it's weird. There's something kind of oddly maybe romantic about it, but in a disturbing way. I don't know. Do with that what you will. But that's what I got. That's how I see that. Another an actually really major aspect today would be Neptune conjunct the North Node at 28 Pisces. So this is a major one, and Neptune is so slow that this aspect really takes up the entire week. So what I'm about to say, it doesn't just apply to Friday. Friday is the peak of it, but this really encapsulates the entire week, maybe even multiple weeks on either side. But Neptune conjunct the North Node, it really shows that we are reaching a turning point as a society. We are reconnecting back to our purpose. What are we meant to do? Where are we? We've largely been directionless and hopeless for the last at least 2 years, like 2 to 3 years especially. I mean, we've been pretty directionless and hopeless since, you could argue, since 2008, or maybe even before that. But I think especially this past 2 to 3 years, very hopeless, very directionless. We don't know what is real, what's not real. Where are we going? Is there any kind of future to look for? It's been very glim, let's just say. So now, having this outer planet conjoining the North Node, I believe that this will give us hope. This shows like we are reconnecting to something very powerful. And it also indicates that we are on the precipice of something even greater, because both the North Node and Neptune are very close to the end of Pisces. Once the North Node technically North Node is retrograde, so it's already entered Pisces. But still, Neptune conjunct North Node at the end of Pisces, it shows we're on the precipice of something very great, of some greater level. Okay, but what I was saying was, once Neptune and then later on Saturn, Neptune and Saturn will both enter Aries around the same time in a couple months in May of this year. Once they do, that shows that we are reaching a critical mass. We're reaching a breaking point as a society. We're going from this like disillusioned, depressed, like foggy Piscean mini era, and we're moving into this era of clarity. Okay, and we're not there yet, right? So I'm speaking from, obviously, like, I'm in that Pisces era now, so this is why astrology is great. Like, I don't entirely know what this is going to be like. Nobody does, because it's never happened before. But by looking at these cycles, we can speculate. And so even though I'm speaking from this Pisces era as it's happening, I can look ahead. Anyone who's into astrology can look ahead and say, Neptune and Saturn entering Aries, we are going to find clarity. We're going to reconnect with that clarity again, maybe in a way that's more visceral than we ever have before. And finally, we're going to reconnect with that purpose as a society. We're going to reconnect with some shared values. It may be tumultuous. We may not all be on the same page at the same time. But this is really a huge step forward into a new chapter. Okay. So anyway, that's what I'm telling you. This stuff is a big deal. There are big things happening. I don't think it always seems clear right now. It's not very super like in your face. But we are reaching at multiple turning points right now for sure. Let's talk about Saturday. So Saturday, Moon leaves Gemini and enters Cancer. So that's great. I mean, Moon is basically offline as far as the Sun is concerned, because Moon is no longer making any kind of major aspect to the Sun. But Moon is very strong in Cancer. And Moon's gaining light. It's becoming full. It's more full than not at this point for sure. So with Moon in Cancer, it shows we very much feel what we feel. We know how we feel. Again, we have this kind of water and air dominance that I talked about last week as well. Something interesting too, when you combine Moon in Cancer with Sun in Aquarius, these are two very, very different signs. They're about as different as you can get. But one interesting connection between the two is that both are very much focused on community. Moon in Cancer is focused on home and family, and it's very tribal in nature. And Sun in Aquarius is very focused on society and groups and people, community, etc. So both are focused on those kind of social groups. So that may be the focus as we start out this weekend. Focusing on family, focusing on friends. Who do we owe our allegiance to, so to speak? Like, is that your community? Is that your town? Is that your friends, your family? It's a little bit different for each person. But whatever that is to you, that may be the focus today. And again, this is on a collective level. Like, obviously the astrology will be different for each person. But that's what I would say on a general level. Saturday, we have two aspects, but they are basically one aspect. So Sun and Mercury are approaching a conjunction that will technically happen at 20 degrees Aquarius. Technically, it happens on Sunday. But even as early as Saturday, Mercury and the Sun will both sextile Chiron. So basically, throughout the weekend, we have Sun and Mercury conjunct at 20 or 19 degrees Aquarius, both sextiling Chiron at 19 Aries, if that makes sense. So basically, when I first saw this, honestly, I thought it was scary. I still think it might be scary because, honestly, most of it is just because Chiron and Aries scares me. Chiron and Aries is very volatile. We are so aware of our traumas and our pain, and we're so vocal about all of it. And yes, in many ways, that is good. It's good to be aware of that. It's good to clear that off your chest. But if we're all, screaming like that, like infants, it becomes dramatic. It becomes tumultuous, and I believe that it can actually create further trauma, that we have to deal with as well. Like all these protests and things. Like, I'm not saying that, don't take me the wrong way. Like, I'm not saying protests are bad. I'm just saying, like, if you get carried away with it, it can be more destructive than it is productive. You know what I mean? Like, there's a right way to do it. And with Chiron and Aries, we may be so passionate that we lose touch of that. That's all I'm saying. So with Sun and Mercury making this sextile to Chiron and Aries, there's this harmonious connection between that trauma, that really like kind of self-oriented trauma of that awareness of like, my trauma, that is connecting to Sun and Mercury in Aquarius, which represents the group. So basically, I'll give you two different ways of looking at this. I'll give you the good and the bad. The bad would be this looks like people moving, like people organizing, people protesting in a way that could be very destructive, very scary. In a way, I think Sun and Mercury in Aquarius almost represents utopia, like looking at things and looking at like how can we rearrange society, which that may start out with great intentions, but it could quickly become destructive. It could, like these views on building a utopia what separates utopia? Like, there's a surprisingly fine line between utopia and dystopia, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think this is very relevant with this aspect. On the other hand, to play devil's advocate, I could see, this is a sextile. Sextiles are very harmonious. Combining fire and air is actually really excellent. Air is cool, fire is warm. So they both kind of balance each other out. So in the more idealistic sense, I could see this being really great for, getting large groups of people together and having really excellent conversations, passionate conversations, working through that trauma on an individual level, but also collectively as well, like at the same time, and really solving all of that in a passionate way. So just depending on how you look at it, both could be possible, both could happen at the same time. But there's definitely a lot of potential for those group and individual traumas to be brought out today, and some really difficult conversations for sure. So that continues into Sunday, because again, technically it's 3 aspects, but it's really just one aspect: Sun and Mercury together, sextiling Chiron. I should also mention that with Sun and Mercury conjunct, Sun burns out Mercury when they're conjunct. Sun basically burns out any planet that it conjoins. So this also suggests being mentally burnt out. I always advise, whenever this happens, because I've been doing these forecasts for years, I always advise, drink plenty of water. You may be tempted to be very busy this weekend. Lots of errands, lots of busyness. That's great, but take breaks. We may be prone to burnout. We may become stressed. We may become anxious. There may be too many details, too much information, too many errands, too many chores, too many duties or tasks. Chill out, be productive, go for it, but take breaks, meditate, smell the roses, etc. You can quickly become lost in this hyper electrified, hyper burnt out, really passionate, really intense energy, and it's just going to burn you out. So chill out. That's my advice. Sunday, okay, we talked about that. One other aspect for Sunday is Mars trining Saturn. So Mars is at 18, and it's so crazy because Moon just happens to be conjunct Mars at the same time. So this is a big deal. I always do notes before these forecasts, but I don't look in detail, and that's on purpose, because if the information is new to me, I'm going to be more passionate about it. I'm going to be more excited about it. So I do this for a reason. But yeah, I'm just noticing how Moon will be conjunct Mars at the same time that both of them trine Saturn. So Mars and Moon at 18 Cancer, trining Saturn at 18 Pisces. Let me unpack this for a second. So, okay, for one, this is very strange because Mars is debilitated in Cancer, but Moon is at home in Cancer. And Moon is such a powerful player. Moon really directs the attention. So Moon conjoining this aspect shows that it's truly, really a big deal. Saturn in Pisces is really suggesting get grounded with your spirituality, get grounded with your ideas, your dreams, your feelings. We need to get grounded with all that. Get grounded with how little you truly know about the universe, mysteries. At the end of the day, we don't know everything, and we never can. This is a weird one. I think this aspect suggests that, we are very emotional. We're very aware of our emotions, and we may fly off the handle. With Moon and Cancer conjunct Mars, it's going to be very easy to go from 0 to 100. I feel this, and that's what I feel, so that's what I'm going with. And I feel super angry, so that's what I'm going to go with. I'm super mad. I feel super happy, so that's what I'm going to go with. It's just any little emotion, we can just pick that up and just roll with it. You know what I mean? But the trine to Saturn is showing can we take that and ground it? Saturn is giving a relatively gentle suggestion. Saturn is typically very harsh, but considering that this is a trine, and considering that Saturn is in Pisces, Saturn is about as soft as it can possibly get when it's in Pisces, especially dealing with this kind of trine. So So I think this is gently guiding us to, get grounded with your feelings, get grounded with your emotions. Like, Moon conjunct Mars is the best aspect for this as well because, like go all the way with your feeling, go with it, feel it, like be very passionate, be intense about it, but ground it, make sense of it, be responsible about it. That's my take on that aspect. Moon conjunct Mars, both trining Saturn. Yeah, so that's what I have for this week. I hope this makes sense for you. I hope this helps. I really do. Next week we have Mercury changing signs. I honestly am not excited about that. And we also have a Leo full moon. So yeah, always new news to report for sure. But thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week.